I'd spent the entire morning baking these cupcakes, measuring every ingredient with precision, making sure the cream cheese frosting was exactly how Charles liked it. But standing here now outside the glass doors of his gym, clutching this carefully wrapped box, I realized that today wasn't going to be the perfect surprise I'd imagined. It was going to be the day everything shattered. Because through that transparent barrier I could see him. And he wasn't alone. Charles. My Charles. Or maybe just Charles. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and throat as I watched his hands pressed against someone else's shoulders, their faces so close they were practically breathing the same air. That smile on his face, the one I thought belonged only to me, was directed at a complete stranger. The glass door physically separated me from that scene, but what I was witnessing emotionally destroyed something deep inside my chest. I stood frozen like time itself had stopped moving. The cupcakes suddenly felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. Red velvet with cream cheese frosting. His absolute favorite. I'd gotten up at 6 this morning to make them from scratch, planning to catch him right after his personal training session ended early today. The surprise was definitely mine, just not the kind I'd been hoping for. I watched him lean in closer to the guy, whispering something directly into his ear, and then the stranger laughed like Charles had just delivered the world's most hilarious joke. Charles slid his hand down the guy's bicep in a gesture that was far too familiar, far too intimate, and I felt like someone had plunged a knife into my chest and twisted it slowly. My fingers gripped the cupcake box so tightly that my nails were practically puncturing the cardboard. One question circled relentlessly through my mind. How long has this been going on? How many times have I been blind enough to trust him completely? Harry, a voice came from behind me, startling me enough that I jerked around. Marcus, one of Charles's gym buddies and a fellow trainer. The expression in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He'd known about this, probably for a while. Man, what are you doing here? I came to surprise Charles, I said, but my voice sounded completely hollow and lifeless even to my own ears. Marcus glanced at the cupcakes in my hands, then through the gym's glass doors at Charles, and his face showed a painful mixture of guilt and sympathy. Harry, look, maybe you should just— No. I cut him off sharply, my voice gaining a bit of strength. I need to see this for myself, with my own eyes. I pushed the door open and the entrance bell echoed loudly throughout the entire gym. Charles instantly froze and looked directly at me. For exactly 1 second, just one fleeting second, raw guilt flashed across his features. But then the mask slipped into place. That casual and charming smile he always wore whenever he needed to talk his way out of an uncomfortable situation. Harry, baby, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be stuck at the office all afternoon. Charles immediately dropped his hand from the stranger and walked toward me with confident, measured steps. I mechanically extended the cupcake box toward him, my voice now completely stripped of emotion. Surprise. That single word left my mouth like it held absolutely no magic, no feeling whatsoever, just a hollow, empty echo of what should have been joy. The stranger was still standing there, adjusting his gym bag like nothing remotely unusual had just happened. Charles took the cupcakes from my hands and smiled with forced enthusiasm, but I couldn't find that genuine warmth in his eyes that used to be there before. Who is he? I asked directly, my voice steadier than I'd expected it to be. Maybe shock had temporarily numbed all my feelings. Charles gave the guy a casual glance like this was the most normal question in the world. Oh, him? That's Ethan. New client of mine. I was just showing him an advanced stretching technique for shoulder mobility issues. Ethan gave me an overly friendly wave. Hey man, nice meeting you. I didn't respond. My gaze stayed locked on Charles, studying his face, analyzing his body language for any sign of truth. A stretching technique? By pinning him against the wall? And standing that close to him? Charles released a nervous laugh, but quickly transformed it into a confident smile. Harry, babe, you're overthinking this whole thing. It was just resistance training. You wouldn't understand the technical aspects of gym work. Just relax. Relax? I'd given him 4 years. 4 years of my most valuable time. Made him breakfast every single morning. Took care of his every need without complaint. And now he was casually telling me to relax when I'd clearly witnessed what I'd witnessed. Charles. I said, and now my voice carried a slight tremor that I couldn't quite control. I'm not stupid. And I'm not blind either. His smile slowly began to fade away. Harry, please. Don't make a scene here in the middle of the gym. The scene? I haven't done anything. I didn't raise my voice, but the words carried significant weight. I'm simply asking a straightforward question. And I gave you a straightforward answer. Charles made his tone slightly firmer, his jaw visibly tightening. You're just making baseless assumptions about nothing. Nothing? My hands clenched into tight fists, nails digging sharply into my palms. I desperately tried to control myself, because I absolutely didn't want to have a complete breakdown in the middle of this public gym. But internally I was literally crumbling apart, piece by painful piece. Fine, I finally managed to say, my voice barely rising above a whisper. We'll discuss this at home, in private. I turned around and started walking away, my breathing fast and shallow. Marcus stopped me at the gate, placing his hand gently on my arm. Harry, man, are you okay? You look extremely pale right now. No, Marcus. I answered honestly, and this was the very first time I'd admitted my true feelings out loud. I'm absolutely not okay. And maybe I haven't been okay for quite some time now. That evening when Charles came home, he behaved like absolutely nothing had happened earlier. He tossed his gym bag carelessly into the corner, took a long shower, and then came into the kitchen to start preparing dinner like this was just another ordinary Tuesday evening. He made casual small talk with me, asking about my day, whether my client meeting went well, as if what happened at the gym this morning existed in some parallel universe. I stood in the living room watching him work in the kitchen, and a deeply disturbing thought crossed my mind. Was this the same man I'd fallen in love with? Or had I never truly known him at all? Charles, I finally said, unable to stay quiet any longer. We seriously need to talk about what happened. Yeah, babe. Sure thing, he replied casually without properly looking at me, continuing to stir his pasta on the stove. I walked over to him and turned the stove completely off, physically forcing him to face me directly. Harry, what the hell are you? Tell me the truth. I looked straight into his eyes, searching for honesty. Is Ethan really just your client and nothing more? Charles released a frustrated sigh. I already told you everything. Yes, he's a client. Nothing else is going on. Then why were you touching him that way? Why was there so much closeness between you two? I wasn't touching him. Charles suddenly became defensive, raising his voice noticeably. This is all in your head, Harry. You're always so insecure and jealous about everything. These are your trust issues talking, not my actual actions. Insecure. Trust issues. Those words hit my chest like literal arrows piercing through flesh. He was weaponizing my emotions against me, making me feel guilty for having completely legitimate concerns about our relationship. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling while Charles snored peacefully beside me like he didn't have a single care in the world. How could he sleep so soundly? How could someone who'd just been caught in a compromising position act so completely unbothered? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that image burned into my brain. His hands on Ethan's shoulders, their faces inches apart, that intimate smile I thought was reserved exclusively for me. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. I slipped out of bed carefully, trying not to wake him, and went to the kitchen. Maybe some chamomile tea would calm my racing thoughts. As the kettle heated on the stove, I heard a faint buzzing sound coming from the bedroom. Charles's phone. I shouldn't check it. I knew I shouldn't. In 4 years together, I'd never once invaded his privacy. We'd built our relationship on mutual trust and respect. But that trust was already fractured, wasn't it? The kettle whistled, pulling me back to the present moment. I poured the hot water over my tea bag and tried to convince myself to let it go. But I couldn't. I found myself walking back toward the bedroom, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would wake Charles. He was still sleeping, one arm thrown over his face. His phone wasn't on the nightstand where he usually kept it. I scanned the room and noticed a faint glow coming from under his pillow. He'd hidden it there. Charles never hid his phone. Never. My stomach dropped like I'd just fallen off a cliff. With trembling fingers I lifted the pillow slowly, and there it was, screen illuminated with a new message. He must have forgotten to silence it before falling asleep. The sender's name was clearly visible, Ethan. Ethan, tonight was unbelievable. The way you made me feel, I can't stop thinking about it. Same time tomorrow? I need more of you. Time seemed to stop completely. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. These weren't messages exchanged between a trainer and clients. These were messages between two people who were intimately involved. I unlocked his phone. His password used to be our anniversary date, but he'd changed it recently. I tried his gym membership number on a hunch, and it opened. What I found inside made my previous fears seem almost trivial by comparison. Messages. Hundreds of them. Flirtatious texts with Ethan that went back months. Late-night phone calls that lasted for hours. Pictures that made me feel physically sick. And Ethan wasn't alone. There were two other names I didn't recognize, Carter and Liam. Each conversation thread told the same story. Charles had been living a completely different life behind my back. My chest constricted painfully, making it difficult to breathe properly. I carefully placed the phone back on the bed like it was an explosive device, then stumbled to the bathroom and gripped the edges of the sink, staring at my own pale reflection. This was real. All of it was horrifyingly, devastatingly real. The shower turned on around 7, meaning Charles was awake. I'd been sitting on the bathroom floor for hours, my cold tea abandoned on the counter, untouched. When he emerged wrapped in a towel, water dripping from his dark hair, he initially didn't notice me there. "Morning, babe. Is there any coffee made yet?" I slowly stood up and walked past him into the bedroom. Without saying a word, I picked up his phone and held it out toward him, the screen still displaying Ethan's explicit message from last night. "This is what's going on." He looked at the screen and I watched his face cycle through multiple emotions in rapid succession. Shock widened his eyes. Panic tightened his features. Then came the desperate attempt to regain control and composure. He inhaled deeply, visibly trying to calculate his next move. "Harry, listen. Just let me explain what's actually happening here." "Explain what exactly?" My voice cracked with barely contained emotion. "That you've been cheating on me? With Ethan? And apparently Carter and Liam too? What possible explanation could make any of this acceptable? You're taking everything out of context and jumping to conclusions." "Context?" I laughed, but it sounded slightly hysterical even to me. "What context makes this okay? That you were in a committed relationship with me while sleeping with multiple other people. That I was here making your meals and supporting your career while you were deleting incriminating messages." "Harry, just stop and listen to me for 1 second. Charles stepped forward, reaching out to touch my shoulder. "Don't touch me." I recoiled so violently that he actually stepped backward. "Don't you dare put your hands on me right now." We stood there in tense silence, both breathing heavily, the space between us feeling like an impossible chasm. Charles ran his hand through his wet hair in obvious frustration. "I never wanted things to turn out this way," he said, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. "But Harry, be honest with yourself. Were you ever really present in this relationship? You were constantly busy in work. Your office projects always took priority. Even weekends you'd be on your laptop instead of spending time with me. I felt completely alone and neglected." My mouth literally fell open in shock. "So this is somehow my fault? I was working hard to provide us with financial stability. And your response was to have affairs with 3 different people. That's not what I'm saying at all." "Then what exactly are you saying?" I demanded, tears now blurring my vision despite my best efforts to hold them back. "That I wasn't good enough for you. That I wasn't interesting enough to keep your attention." Charles met my eyes, and what he said next felt like the final nail being hammered into our relationship's coffin. His voice was quiet but unmistakably clear. "Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe this relationship stopped being enough for me a long time ago." Those words. Those simple, brutally honest words. They destroyed whatever small piece of hope I'd been desperately clinging to. The irrational hope that maybe this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that we could somehow work through this nightmare together. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" "Get out of this bedroom right now. I can't even look at you anymore." Charles grabbed some clothes from the dresser and left without another word. I heard the front door slam a few minutes later. Only then did I allow myself to completely fall apart, sliding down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, sobbing into my hands like my entire world had just collapsed. Because it had. I called in sick to work. There was absolutely no way I could sit in meetings and pretend everything was normal, when my entire life had just imploded. Instead, I spent the day methodically going through our shared apartment, seeing it with completely new eyes. Every item told a story I'd apparently been too naive to read correctly. The expensive cologne on his dresser that I'd never seen him wear around me. The gym bag he always kept locked. Those mysterious late-night emergency training sessions that now made perfect horrible sense. How had I missed all these obvious signs? How had I been so incredibly blind? My phone buzzed with a text from Noah, my best friend since college. We hadn't talked much lately because I'd been so absorbed in my relationship with Charles. But he had an uncanny ability to reach out exactly when I needed him most. Noah, hey stranger. Coffee this week? Feel like I haven't seen you in forever. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Me. Can you come over now? I really need someone to talk to. Noah, on my way. 20 minutes. He arrived in 15, carrying takeout bags and wearing an expression of immediate concern. The second he saw my face, he set everything down and pulled me into a tight hug. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed that physical comfort until it happened. What did he do? Noah asked quietly. So I told him everything. The gym incident. The hidden phone. The messages from multiple men. Charles's cruel words about me not being enough. Noah listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each new revelation. That absolute piece of garbage, Noah finally said when I finished. Harry, I'm so sorry. You deserved so much better than this. Did I though? The question escaped before I could stop it. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was so focused on my career that I neglected our relationship. Maybe if I'd paid more attention. Stop right there, Noah cut me off firmly. Don't you dare blame yourself for his choices. Being busy with work doesn't give someone permission to cheat. If he felt neglected, a decent human being would have communicated that to you. He could have suggested couples therapy or had an honest conversation about his needs. Instead, he chose to lie, sneak around and betray your trust with multiple people. That's entirely on him, not you. I knew logically that Noah was right, but emotionally I still felt like I'd somehow failed. I gave him 4 years of my life. 4 years of cooking his favorite meals, supporting his fitness career, planning our future together, and the whole time I couldn't even finish the sentence. Noah squeezed my shoulder. I know this feels impossible right now, but you're gonna get through this. You're one of the strongest people I know, Harry, and you're definitely not staying in this apartment another night. Pack a bag. You're coming to stay with me until you figure out your next steps. I can't just leave. We signed the lease together. Watch me help you leave, Noah said with determination. Charles doesn't get to make you feel unsafe or uncomfortable in your own home. We'll deal with the lease situation later. Right now you need space from him and everything he represents. As if summoned by our conversation, I heard keys in the front door. Charles walked in, looking exhausted and disheveled, like he'd been driving around aimlessly all day. He stopped short when he saw Noah standing protectively beside me. Harry, we need to talk about this situation properly. There's nothing to discuss. I interrupted, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm leaving? Don't be so dramatic about everything. We can work through this like adults if you just calm down and listen to reason. Dramatic? My voice finally rose. You cheated on me with 3 different people. You lied to my face. You made me feel crazy for having completely valid concerns. And then you told me I wasn't enough. What part of that situation requires me to calm down? Charles's expression hardened. You know what? Fine. Leave then. Run away like you always do when things get difficult. This is exactly why our relationship fell apart. You never wanted to actually work on our problems. Our problems. I felt like I was losing my mind. The only problem here is that you're a liar and a cheater who destroyed 4 years of my life. I destroyed it. You were never really here anyway. You were always at the office, always prioritizing everything else over us. I needed affection, attention, physical connection, things you stopped providing. So yes, I found them elsewhere. Can you honestly say you're completely blameless in all of this? The sheer audacity of his words left me momentarily speechless. Noah, however, had no such problem. "Get away from him," Noah said, his voice dangerously low as he positioned himself between us. "You don't get to manipulate and gaslight him after what you've done. Harry trusted you completely and you threw that away for cheap thrills. Own your mistakes instead of trying to blame the person you hurt." Charles looked at Noah with obvious disdain. "This is between me and Harry. You need to stay out of our personal business." "Not anymore, it isn't," I said firmly, finding my voice again. "Noah's right. I'm done listening to your excuses and twisted logic. I'm packing my essential belongings, and I'm leaving this apartment today. We can arrange a time later when you're not here for me to get the rest of my things." I walked into our bedroom. No, his bedroom now, and started pulling clothes from the closet. My hands shook as I stuffed items into my largest suitcase, but I forced myself to keep moving. Noah appeared in the doorway, standing guard in case Charles tried to follow. Charles did eventually appear, but he stayed in the doorway, watching me pack with an unreadable expression. "So that's it? 4 years together and you're just going to throw everything away without even trying to fix things?" I stopped packing and looked at him directly. "You threw everything away the moment you decided to cheat. You made that choice, not me. I would have done anything to make this relationship work. But you didn't give me that option. You just lied and destroyed everything we built together. I made mistakes, but so did you. We both contributed to this mess." "No," I said firmly. "We didn't both cheat. We didn't both lie. We didn't both break our promises and vows. That was all you, Charles. And I'm done pretending otherwise." I zipped up my suitcase and grabbed my duffel bag. Noah took the heavier luggage from me and together we walked past Charles without another word. As we reached the front door, Charles called out one last time, "You'll regret this, Harry. You'll realize what you gave up." I paused at the threshold and looked back at him one final time. "The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were much sooner. Goodbye, Charles." And then I walked out, leaving 4 years of my life behind in that apartment. I packed my belongings that night in complete silence, moving through the apartment like a ghost haunting rooms that no longer felt like home. Charles sat in the living room, hunched over on the couch with his head buried in his hands, as I dragged my suitcase from the bedroom. My duffel bag hung heavily on my shoulder, and I took one final look around the space we'd shared for nearly 3 years. The place I'd foolishly believed would be our forever home. "Where are you going, Harry?" Charles finally asked when he heard the rolling wheels of my suitcase against the hardwood floor. But his voice lacked the urgency it should have carried. Instead, it held only a tired resignation, like he'd already accepted this outcome. "Away from this apartment. Away from you. Away from all of this," I responded flatly, setting my keys on the counter with a decisive thud that echoed through the suddenly too large space. "Don't be so dramatic about everything. We can work through this if you just..." "Dramatic?" I spun around to face him and my voice finally cracked with the weight of everything I'd been holding inside. "You cheated on me with 3 different people. This went on for months while I remained completely oblivious. What part of that deserves me staying calm?" He said nothing, just kept nervously rubbing his hands together like he was trying to wash away invisible guilt. I moved toward the door, my hand reaching for the doorknob, but then I stopped. There was one final question I needed answered, regardless of how much the truth might destroy whatever pieces of me remained intact. "Charles," my voice dropped to something almost vulnerable, barely above a whisper. "Did you ever actually love me? Or was our entire relationship just pretend on your end?" He slowly lifted his head, and for one brief second I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret? Confusion? Or maybe just complete emptiness where genuine emotion should have existed. "I tried, Harry," he finally said, his voice barely audible in the quiet apartment. "I genuinely tried my best to feel what I thought I should feel. Tried. Not loved, not even cared for deeply, just tried. Like I was some kind of project he'd ultimately failed at completing." "That's not really an answer," I whispered back. "But I suppose it's the only honest one you're capable of giving me." I opened the door and the cold night air immediately hit my face like a slap of reality. As I stepped across the threshold, I heard Charles behind me desperately mumbling something, fragments of "please and we can fix this" floating through the air. But I refused to look back this time, not anymore. I drove directly to Noah's apartment across town. He opened the door wearing his pajamas, clearly prepared for bed. But the moment he saw my face, tear-stained, exhausted, completely shattered, he pulled me inside without asking a single question. "Harry, man, what happened?" He dragged my suitcase into his entryway. "Charles," I said simply, and that single name was apparently enough. Noah understood immediately. He guided me to his couch, brought me a glass of water, and then sat beside me in supportive silence. When I finally told him everything, Ethan, the messages, 4 years of lies built on top of more lies, I completely fell apart. I cried harder than I had in years, and Noah just sat there holding my shoulder, providing the kind of steady presence I desperately needed. "Why was I such an incredible fool, Noah?" I asked while roughly wiping away tears that wouldn't stop falling. There were so many obvious signs. His unexplained late nights. That new cologne I'd never smelled before. Changing his password suddenly. And I ignored every single red flag. "You weren't a fool," Noah said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You were just someone who loved another person. And when you love someone, you trust them. This isn't your fault in any way." "But I saw it, Noah," I continued, fresh tears streaming down my face. "At that gym, his hands all over that guy. That intimate smile. Then those explicit messages. Those photographs I can't unsee. I witnessed everything and still somehow convinced myself that maybe I was misinterpreting things." Noah grabbed my face gently in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes directly. "Harry, listen to me carefully. You deserve infinitely better than what Charles gave you. You deserve someone who values you, who makes you their priority, who treats you with basic respect." And Charles was absolutely none of those things. I slowly nodded, though actually believing his words felt completely impossible in this moment. "You can stay here as long as you need," Noah assured me, "and I'm with you through every step of whatever comes next." That night I lay on Noah's couch, staring blankly at his ceiling, wondering what my future looked like now. 4 years invested in someone who apparently never gave me the genuine love I deserved. 4 years in a relationship that was only real from my side of things. But perhaps, just perhaps, this devastating ending was actually a new beginning in disguise. 3 weeks later, I was slowly attempting to reassemble the scattered pieces of my life into something resembling normalcy. With Noah's help, I'd found a small but comfortable studio apartment in the downtown area, and I'd deliberately thrown myself into work to avoid thinking about Charles constantly. But obviously, every night when the lights went off and I was alone with my thoughts, Charles's cruel words, "Maybe you weren't enough," played relentlessly on loop in my mind. Today I sat in a quiet coffee shop near my new apartment, working on a presentation on my laptop when someone approached my table. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" His voice was deep and genuinely warm. I looked up, and the man asking was attractive in an understated, natural way. Tall build, sharply defined jawline, and intense gray-blue eyes that seemed remarkably intelligent. He wore a simple black shirt and jeans, with a worn leather satchel hanging from his shoulder. "No, feel free," I said, gesturing toward the empty chair across from me. "Thanks, I appreciate it," he replied with a slight smile before sitting down and setting up his laptop and coffee. For several minutes, we both worked silently on our respective tasks. But then, when I reached for my coffee cup, I accidentally knocked over my pen holder, sending pens clattering across the floor. "Damn it. Sorry," I muttered, quickly bending down to collect them. "Let me help," he said, also crouching down. And we gathered the scattered pens simultaneously. When our eyes met briefly, he gave me a thoughtful look. "Having a rough day?" I gave him a confused expression. "What makes you say that?" "You've been staring at that exact same slide for at least 20 minutes, he observed, nodding toward my laptop screen. "And you've already added 4 sugar packets to your coffee even though you made a face after the first one. You're clearly distracted by something significant. Let me take a guess. Recent breakup." I was genuinely shocked. "How could you possibly know that?" "I'm naturally observant," he explained simply. "Plus I've experienced it myself. That particular brand of distracted misery is surprisingly recognizable once you've lived through it." I actually laughed slightly, and it was honestly the first genuine laugh I'd managed in 3 entire weeks. "Is it really that obvious to everyone?" only to someone who knows exactly what to look for. He extended his hand across the table. "I'm Julian, by the way." "Harry," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and confident without being aggressive. "Nice meeting you, Harry." Even under these less than ideal circumstances, somehow we transitioned into actual conversation, and I was surprised by how effortless talking with Julian felt. He actually listened attentively when I spoke, asked thoughtful follow-up questions, and never once made me feel judged. When I eventually mentioned Charles briefly, without diving into all the painful details, Julian showed what seemed like genuine empathy. "Sounds like he definitely didn't deserve someone like you," Julian said straightforwardly. "Anyone who makes you question your fundamental worth isn't worth keeping in your life." "Maybe you're right," I admitted cautiously. "But understanding that intellectually and actually feeling it emotionally, those are two completely different challenges." "Absolutely true," Julian agreed with a knowing nod. "Healing isn't a linear process at all. Some days you'll feel significantly better, other days you're right back where you started. But eventually, gradually, it does get easier to breathe again." I studied him carefully. His words carried a certain maturity and understanding that only comes from real lived experience. "You've been through something similar yourself?" "Unfortunately, yes," Julian admitted without hesitation. "Different specific details, but the core pain was essentially the same. It took me nearly a full year to properly move forward. And now I'm genuinely better," Julian said with quiet confidence. "Stronger than before, much clearer about what I actually want and what I absolutely won't tolerate anymore." So yes, ultimately the experience improved who I am as a person. There was something healing about this conversation. Maybe it was Julian's refreshing honesty, or his completely judgment-free presence. Or maybe it was simply that finally someone existed who genuinely understood what I was experiencing. The coffee shop was eventually closing for the evening, and as we both packed up our belongings, Julian said somewhat casually, "Harry, this might seem strange since we literally just met today, but would you be interested in grabbing actual dinner sometime?" "Not as a date or anything," he quickly clarified, clearly not wanting to pressure me. "Just as two people who understand what terrible breakups feel like." I hesitated for a moment, but then Noah's encouraging words echoed in my mind. "You deserve so much better." And maybe finding better started with allowing myself to get back out there, meeting new people, rebuilding my social connections. "Yeah." I finally smiled. "Another genuine one. I'd actually really like that." Julian's face brightened noticeably. "Great. How about Saturday evening? There's this excellent Thai place downtown if you like that kind of food." "Thai sounds perfect," I agreed. And for the first time in weeks I felt something other than crushing sadness. It wasn't quite happiness yet, but it was definitely hope, small and fragile, but undeniably present. As we exchanged phone numbers and said our goodbyes, I walked back to my apartment feeling lighter somehow. The weight crushing my chest hadn't completely disappeared, but it had lessened just enough for me to breathe a little easier. Maybe I wasn't ready for anything romantic yet. Maybe I wouldn't be ready for months or even longer. But having someone kind in my life, who understood my pain without requiring explanations, felt like exactly what I needed right now. That night, lying in my new bed in my new apartment, I didn't cry myself to sleep for the first time since leaving Charles. Instead, I stared at the ceiling thinking about Julian's gray-blue eyes and the way he'd listened so attentively to everything I said. I thought about how he'd made me laugh when I'd forgotten what genuine laughter felt like, and I thought that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay eventually. The healing process would be long and difficult and far from linear, but for the first time since discovering Charles's betrayal, I actually believed I could survive this. I could rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone who knew his worth, someone who would never again settle for being treated as anything less than a priority. Charles had broken me, but I was determined not to stay broken forever. Over the following 2 weeks, spending time with Julian became surprisingly therapeutic for my wounded heart. We met regularly for coffee, occasionally for dinner, and sometimes we just walked through the city park talking about everything and nothing. Julian gave me something Charles never had: genuine interest in my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams for the future. Small gestures made significant impacts. Like how he remembered my exact coffee order without me needing to repeat it. Medium vanilla latte, extra shot, oat milk. Or how he'd send a simple text after particularly exhausting days. Did you make it home safely? You seemed really tired earlier. These seemingly small things meant everything after experiencing years of Charles's emotional neglect and indifference. But simultaneously Charles started making contact again. First came text messages, then phone calls, then increasingly desperate voicemails that made my stomach twist with complicated emotions. Charles, Harry, I know I destroyed everything we had, but 4 years together has to mean something. Can we please just talk face to face? Charles, I can't sleep, can't eat properly, can't stop thinking about how badly I hurt you. Please give me one chance to explain myself. Charles, you were right about everything. I was selfish and cruel and I threw away the best thing in my life. I'm begging you, Harry, please. I initially ignored everything, deleting messages without reading them fully, sending calls straight to voicemail. But eventually, guilt began creeping in despite my anger. 4 years don't disappear easily, regardless of how painful the ending was. One Friday evening, as Julian was dropping me off at home after dinner at an excellent Italian restaurant, I spotted Charles waiting outside my apartment building. He held a bouquet of flowers, my favorite white lilies, and looked visibly nervous, almost fragile. Harry, he said the moment he saw me, his voice carrying an almost desperate quality. Please just give me 5 minutes to talk. That's all I'm asking. I glanced at Julian, who had immediately gone on alert beside me. Is this Charles? I introduced quietly. My ex-boyfriend. Julian nodded in understanding, though his body language shifted into something protective. You want me to stay here with you? I appreciated his concern more than I could express. But this conversation needed to happen eventually. No, it's fine. You can go. I'll be okay handling this. Julian reluctantly agreed, but said firmly, call me if anything feels wrong. Anything at all. I can be back here in 5 minutes flat. After Julian's car disappeared down the street, I turned to face Charles directly. He had dark circles under his eyes. His clothes looked rumpled and slept in, and honestly he appeared like a complete mess. But I reminded myself firmly, this was the consequence of his own choices, not mine. What do you want, Charles? My voice came out flat and emotionless, which felt appropriate. You, he said desperately, taking a step closer while extending the flowers toward me. Harry, I made a terrible mistake. I was incredibly stupid and unbelievably selfish and I hurt you in ways that are unforgivable. But please, give me one more opportunity. Let me prove that I'm capable of change. My chest ached with that familiar pain. How many nights had I fantasized about hearing exactly these words? How many imaginary conversations had I constructed in my mind where Charles apologized profusely and somehow everything magically became okay again? But reality differed dramatically from imagination, and now that these words were finally being spoken aloud, they felt hollow, meaningless. Charles, I said deliberately, keeping my voice steady and controlled. You cheated on me with 3 different people, for months. You completely shattered my ability to trust you, and now you expect me to forget of that, just because you brought flowers? No, he quickly responded, lowering the flowers to his side. I don't expect anything. Harry, I love you. I didn't appreciate what I had. I took you completely for granted, but now I finally understand how important you were. You're everything to me. I corrected him firmly. I was something to you once, but clearly that wasn't enough to keep you faithful. You were always enough. Charles nearly shouted in frustration. I was the stupid one who couldn't see what was right in front of me. Please, Harry. Just one more chance. No. That single word came out clear and absolutely final. Charles's face completely fell. Harry, please don't. No, Charles. I maintained my firm and unwavering tone. I deserve someone who genuinely values me, who makes me their actual priority, who stays honest and faithful. And that person isn't you. It never was you, was it? I can change everything, he pleaded desperately. I'll start therapy immediately. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. You shouldn't change for me, I explained patiently. You should change for yourself, because you recognize you have problems, And honestly, I don't think I could ever trust you again anyway. Those 4 years we spent together, how much of it was actually real? How much was genuine? I'll never know the truth. Charles remained silent for several long seconds, processing my words, and then he slowly nodded in defeated acceptance. Tears were visible in his eyes now. I understand, he finally whispered. I'm truly sorry, Harry, for everything I did, for everything I made you feel, for destroying something beautiful because of my own selfishness. I know you are, I replied more softly. And maybe someday far in the future I'll be able to fully forgive you. But not now, not yet. And we definitely cannot be together again. Charles looked at me one final time, a long, lingering look filled with regret and genuine loss. And then he quietly walked away, leaving the flowers abandoned on the sidewalk behind him. I stood there alone processing what had just happened and surprisingly felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. Closure. Finally, actual closure. The next day when I met Julian for coffee, I told him about the encounter with Charles. I'm really proud of you, Julian said sincerely, his hand briefly touching mine across the table. That couldn't have been easy to do. No, it definitely wasn't, I admitted honestly, but it was absolutely the right decision. Now I can actually start moving forward properly. Harry, Julian hesitated momentarily before continuing, I know you're still in the healing process, and I absolutely don't want to pressure you in any way. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm interested in you, in getting to know you more deeply, in potentially exploring something meaningful together. My heart skipped a beat, but in an exciting way rather than a frightening one. Nervous butterflies instead of anxious dread. Julian, I honestly don't know if I'm ready for any new relationship right now, I said carefully. Charles hurt me deeply and I need to work on healing myself first before I can be good for someone else. And I completely understand and respect that. Julian smiled without any visible disappointment. I'm not rushing anything here. I want you to heal fully and grow into whoever you're meant to become. And if eventually we explore something romantic together, that would be wonderful. But if not, I'm genuinely happy just being your friend. In that moment, in that simple and pressure-free understanding, I realized something important. This was what genuine care looked like. This was real respect. This was the foundation that had never existed with Charles. Thank you, I said with complete sincerity, for understanding me, for being patient, for just being exactly who you are. Always, Julian promised, and as we sat there together in the coffee shop's warm lighting, the future suddenly didn't seem quite so terrifying anymore. Maybe I was finally heading in the right direction. Maybe, finally, I was becoming the person I was always meant to be.